All right, so for this instance, I purchased my domain name through GoDaddy.com, and I have my hosting done through InMotion Hosting. So what I need to do is I need to connect that domain name to the hosting account. It's like an address, or pointing that address to the actual house itself, show me where those two are connected. Now I could take a domain name and I could point it to a whole new host every couple weeks or whatever I wanted to do. You can always move that around. It just depends on where you're pointing it to and what you use. Try that again. What you use to connect that is something called a name server. That's the name of the server, basically, we're pointing it over to. So when I registered for InMotion, it told me what the name servers were. So it's just two different names that I need to put in. And I have my domain name through GoDaddy. So I'm going to go into the domain names area. I'm going to find the domain I'm looking for, which is Online Marketing Concepts. I'm going to click on that. And it's going to give me some very basic information. So here's like my contact information that's going to be throwing out to the public if I don't keep that private. Again, I didn't pay to keep that private, so I'm not too worried about that right now. And then I'm going to come over to Manage DNS. That's where I want to manage the information about my server. So I click on that, and you'll see right here at the top, Name Servers. Now it's going to give you, now if you purchase it through GoDaddy, it's going to give you two name servers by default. I think they're like, they're random name servers that are specific to GoDaddy hosting. What you'll want to do is click on Change, and probably have to change it over from default, which GoDaddy does, to custom. And then for InMotion, these are the two name servers. Usually they'll start out with like an NS or NS1, something like that, and then the name of the company. And they'll give you two of them, so I'll add those two in there and I'll hit save. I've already got those two in there right now, so I'm not too worried about that. I can just go ahead and hit cancel. You'll hit save. Every domain name host is going to be a little bit different, but for the most part, this is exactly what you're looking for. Is just find where they have the name server information, change that out, and put that in there. Now, this does take a little while to propagate, to let all the servers know that this has changed. It's not going to be instantaneous. It could take anywhere from 5 minutes to, I think they say like up to 72 hours. I've never really seen it take quite that long. At most, probably an hour or so. It just depends on everything going on with servers at the time. But for the most part, you change that out, and within a few minutes, you'll probably see your domain name up and working. That's all you need to do for that. Those are your name servers. So I'm going to come on and get out of GoDaddy, and I'm going to go to my actual domain name itself. So for this one, I had registered Online Marketing Concepts, which is a complete blank domain name. And if I type it in right now and hit return, as long as my name servers are working, you're going to see something like this where it asks you to finalize the install of WordPress. Now, if you watched the last video, you'll know that the server did all this information for me. I didn't have to do any of this. If I do it manually, this is what you have to go through. So by default, first you have to pick your language that you're going to be speaking. I'm going to stick with English because I don't know any of these other languages. And it's just saying, okay, be prepared here. You're going to need that database information that I just told you had to make sure you wrote down and kept safe. So I'm going to say, okay, I've got it. Well, let's go. All right, so we're just going to copy it on over. The database name I told you was the same as my username here. And in this case, I have the password, just asking for here. Now the database host, for the most part, it's always going to be localhost. That's why they came in there by default. Your hosting provider, if you have a real cheap old GoDaddy hosting, I know they have some crazy long database name. Not something you'll have to really worry about for the most part if you're registering hosting accounts nowadays. But for the most part, just know that you can change it if you need to. And then the prefix for your database. Okay, so that's like all the tables are all named WP something. If you want to try to prevent being hacked, you may want to just go ahead and just change it up to something a little bit different. I'll usually just go ahead and put in like a letter and a number or something like that, just to kind of change it up, because hackers may look for WP- whatever in a database. I'm going to change it to that. Nothing affects anything that you do by doing this. Just go ahead and keep that underscore in there, and it really doesn't affect anything. Just keep it to yourself, and we'll say submit. And we're going to run the installation, and within a couple seconds here, it's going to ask me what I want to call my website. So I'm going to call this Online Marketing Concepts. Whatever. I show you how to change this later on. And you come up with a username. I'll just call it Keith. You can maybe be a little bit more creative than that. come up with something that's a little bit more secure, it doesn't matter. You can keep that one simple. But then it gives you a password that you can use. I would definitely suggest keeping something pretty complex like that and then using a program maybe like LastPass to save it. So that way you're not having to try to type all that stuff every time. We'll get into that a little bit later on as well. And I'll go ahead and put in my email address and I'll say install. Don't click on that. Yeah, for the most part, I wouldn't click on that right now. We can talk about that later. And we'll say install WordPress. So now it's doing the very final stages of installing WordPress, putting that information that I just typed in. If you had any database errors, it would have told you by now. But for the most part, that should go pretty smoothly. I'm not going to worry about that. And I'll say, okay, log in, just to make sure that this works. One thing to write down is the login page. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to paste it in here. There are basically two locations where you can log in at. So let's go ahead and take a look at these here right now. We can go to your domain name / wp-login.php or wp-admin. I prefer that because it's shorter and it actually redirects to this top domain name up here, or actually I should say URL. But either one of those will work. So maybe go ahead and write those down if you're new to WordPress. And I'm going to put in my new username, which was Keith, and my password. And log in, and voila, I am inside of WordPress. Next video, we're going to talk about all the different things in WordPress and start to get familiar with it.